First and foremost, I'd like to extend my warmest welcome to all of you in this virtual conference space with us. So you are joining one of the parallel events of the 66th session of the Commission on the Status of Women in 2022. The title of this panel is Rainbow Cities Keep Moving Forward, Strategies to Build a Transgender Inclusive City. Organized by Taiwan Tongzhi Hotline Association and the Office of Gender Equality of Taipei City Government. So I am the moderator of today's session. My name is Tru Tong. Identified as a non-binary person, I've been volunteering and serving on the executive board of Hotline for over 10 years. I am very honored and excited to be here. I am looking forward to joining conversations with our amazing panelists and participants. So before we start officially, we have some housekeeping and administrative tasks to go over. First and foremost, I want to invite all of the speakers, the panelists for today, to turn on your camera. Let's take a picture together while we're still here. I mean, the participants, the audience are welcome to turn on their cameras too, if you don't mind. But if you're not comfortable with this, then it doesn't matter. We just need a picture with the speakers. Okay? Okay, the picture is taken. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for putting on a great smile and turning on your camera. All right, next, some housekeeping announcements for this meeting. To avoid a disruption, we will put everybody's microphone on mute while the speakers are presenting. Each speaker will have 15 minutes for presentation. I will give a friendly verbal cue at the 13th minute of their presentation. And there will be a Q&A time at the end of all this. So if anyone in the audience has any questions or feedback during this meeting, please feel free to leave them in the chat. We will be gathering all the questions and raising them during the Q&A time all together. And in the meantime, sorry, I don't think we have the emojis here, do we? But anyways, if you find there's any emojis you could use, feel free to let us know if you agree or like something by using the clapping hands or thumbs up emojis. Usually we do that in the Zoom conference. But anyways, so without any further ado, let's welcome our first panelist, Dr. Shamindra Weerawardana, to talk about building government and NGO relations from the perspectives of international advocacy. Let's welcome Dr. Shamindra.
Thank you very much. Ayubowan, Larkum Wanakam. It's a great pleasure to be here. So my name is Chamindra, and thank you very much for inviting me to this space. So I'm a senior consultant to the International Lesbian, Gay, Trans and Intersex Association ILGA World based in Geneva, and it's a great pleasure to represent ILGA World this morning in our local time, and I'm joining this event from the traditional territories from the Lake Wungan people, the Coast Salish people on the west coast of Turtle Island, also known as Canada. And so colleagues and guests, the brief given to me in this event is to address some of the concerns emanating from relations between government bodies, government departments, and non-governmental organizations. So this is a thematic area that is very important, if not crucial, to the sector of what we know as LGBTQI plus human rights. And I'll tell you why. So the sector of LGBTQI plus human rights, or the sector of human rights that concern people of diverse sexual orientations, gender identities and expressions, and sex characteristics. So that is the abbreviation that is increasingly preferred by United Nations bodies, for example, SOGIESC, SOGIESC, Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity and Expression, Rights of People of Diverse SOGIESC. It has almost never come from above, come from government bodies, come from legislatures and so on. The work has always started at the grassroots, involving people who wanted to change circumstances around them, who wanted to imagine a different, if not more safer and much more welcoming, much more caring, much more accepting world around them. So people who wanted change. So that is where the non-profit sector comes in, the non-government sector comes in, where people's organizing actually comes in. So this whole sector of international philanthropic funding, and then non-profit organizations like ILGA World, which work internationally, and non-profit organizations that work nationally, like the Taiwan Tongzhi Hotline Association, play a huge role, a very important role in advocating for the rights of people of diverse SOGIESC. So this is something we see right across the world. So the non-profit sector cannot be ignored in any way when we talk about LGBTQI plus human rights. So this is where there are a number of challenges involved. So for example, if you think of the ECOSOC status at the UN, because this is a United Nations event, so the Economic and Social Council at the UN, when ECOSOC status is granted to organizations. Now ILGA World has it. Some other leading international LGBT rights organizations, generalist LGBTQI rights organizations have it, but there is next to no trans human rights organization that has ECOSOC status. So these applications submitted by even internationally active trans human rights organizations kind of lag behind. So there is always a difficulty for LGBTQI human rights organizations, especially trans and intersex human rights organizations, to gain the right kind of recognition in the international sector and to have a seat at the table. So when you think in terms of, today's topic, so the Taiwan city government, the Taipei city government is involved here. When you think of local government, right, again, very often there are issues where relations between non-profit sector organizations and government bodies may not be very straightforward, to say the least. So how can you address those challenges? So that is, one of the key questions now when you want to develop public policy that is trans inclusive or intersex human rights inclusive, or inclusive in the part of the world I live in of the rights of indigenous people, for example. One key point is to always focus on the specific interest groups involved. So if you want to develop policies that make your city council or make your local authority a trans inclusive, trans affirming local authority, it is important to talk to trans people, first of all, in the local context. So very often when you think in terms of those lines, what you come across is a certain level of, the best word in the English language is intransigence of these government bodies, difficult to talk to government bodies. At times this is because of institutionalized systemic forms of transphobia, homophobia, intersex phobia. At other times, it is also because of lack of awareness. So people in government bodies are not very sensitive to these human rights issues. So there are countries where There are minority rights movements, and the majority communities who occupy, high positions in government are not very receptive to the minority rights movements. A great example is where I come from, Sri Lanka. So in terms of, as a local government, when you try to develop, these the relations with non-profit organizations, one key point where people in positions of responsibility have opening up channels of communication with non-profit sector activists, with human rights defenders, especially if it comes to trans human rights, with trans human rights defenders. And then also it is important to, it's a matter of perspective, you see. So if you perceive non-governmental organizations as resource bases, to improve your public policy provisioning, and the people who are involved in these non-governmental organizations, the rights defenders doing the work as resource persons, that changes the whole picture, you see. So this is a kind of a policy transformation we would love to see in many countries. And so Taiwan, for instance, has made a lot of progress when it comes to sexual orientation related rights. And we know that it has not been a walk in the park. It's been a very difficult way forward. And when it comes to trans human rights, the city government's commitment to developing stronger trans human rights provisions, better services for trans citizens and residents is reflected in this event, for instance. So this whole understanding of how you put things in perspective is very, very important. And then also one key point to highlight is that the range of issues we're talking about here are very diverse. So when you say SOGI-esque rights, sexual orientation related rights, it is one body of rights. Gender identity and expression related rights is another body of rights. And when you say sex characteristics, intersex human rights, it's yet another body of rights. So in general, in casual parlance, there is a tendency to say, oh, LGBTQI human rights or LGBTQI plus human rights is one body of human rights. I mean, if you try to deal with LGBT rights in that way, you're bound to end up with inconsistencies and problems. Any government, I mean, whether it's a national government or a provincial government or a local government body, needs to kind of take stock of this reality, right? So, for example, when you cover sexual orientation related rights, even today, even this day and age, even in 2022, you only talk very often of cisgender people. You never talk about sexual orientation related rights of trans people or of intersex people, right? And when you talk of trans human rights, it's a separate body of rights that concern bodily autonomy, that concern self-determination, that concern a range of other issues involving healthcare and law reform and so on. And then again, sexual orientation related rights kind of intercept somewhere when it comes to trans human rights. So when it comes to intersex human rights, there can be some intersex people who are trans, there can be some intersex people who do not identify as trans, there can be some intersex people who are heteronormative, some intersex people who are non-heteronormative. So it's a very diverse range of rights you're talking about. So if you're a government body, it is very important to kind of narrow down, identify the key areas, the policy areas in which you are focused on working on at a given point of time, A, and B, giving priority to the expertise and the insights of people concerned by that area of rights. So if you want to develop good trans human rights policies, it's very important to talk to trans people from a diversity of backgrounds. So very often you see in some countries, national level legislation is developed without adequately on trans human rights, right? Without adequately consulting trans people. And the legislation doesn't serve the purpose, it ends up causing a whole range of issues. And then you have another question that might be of interest is in terms of political strategy, because people who sit in government bodies are very often elected officials. So how do you work around your political strategy in a socially conservative space in terms of developing a political strategy that stands for human rights of all citizens, while maintaining your position in power? And how do you face the opposition that would come from people on the opposite camp who are more conservative and who are likely to attack you on the basis of your advocacy for human rights as politicians? So these are real issues, right, that need to be attended to as well. And in terms of, that's where the nonprofit sector, the arts, people who do this work on the ground can play a major role in terms of raising awareness on these issues and in terms of advocating for social transformation. And so as politicians, as elected representatives, it is also very important to think in terms of strategizing. When you say, for example, in some countries, it may be applicable to develop a full parliamentary bill or a law on legal gender recognition. But in some other countries, it may be more workable to develop a law that is a human rights act, or it does not mention explicitly legal gender recognition. It says human rights, a human rights act or a law based that focuses on the human rights of all citizens. And in there you can include provisions for legal gender recognition, provisions for healthcare, provisions for equal marriage, etc., and work around it. So how you articulate this and how you manage the opposition that comes from opposing political forces is a key factor as well to be factored in when you're in politics and when you're in positions of responsibility in government. So those are areas that would form a basis for an ongoing conversation. So to wind up, I would say that government representatives should take a great example from the Taipei City Council and the City Council's commitment to the provision of trans human rights in this specific case, and maintaining those channels of communication, developing avenues for exchange between productive exchanges between the nonprofit sector and government representatives is a very important foundational step in moving forward in the right direction in terms of developing human rights provision, be it trans human rights or, for that matter, any other area of human rights. So on that note, thank you very much for inviting me to this space, and over to you, Drew.
Mindra? Okay, excellent point on simply the lack of awareness in local our government agencies about trans issues and the importance of talking to trans people of diverse background to bring new perspective to the government agencies. So next, our panelist is Pan, and she will be addressing exactly these issues by bringing transgender issues when working with government departments, the public and private collaborations in Taiwan on transgender rights advocacy. Before I hand over to Pan, I just want to make a point that we had some viewers on YouTube reported that there were white noise in their video. Just want to let you guys know that we have resolved the issue. The streaming should be okay now. So thank you for your patience. And next, let's welcome Pan.
Hi everyone. This is Pam from Taiwan Tongzhi Hotline Association, and I'm a member of Transgender Working Group for 5 years. And I'm glad to be here sharing our experience in transgender rights advocacy with people all over the world. And I'm using a PDF, so it won't be full screen. Sorry for that. Okay. So let me introduce Taiwan Tongzhi Hotline first. Taiwan Tongzhi Hotline Association was founded in 1998 and is now the oldest and largest LGBTQ plus organization in Taiwan. And the hotline is dedicated to achieving equality and providing resources for the LGBTQ plus community through creating public dialogue and gender inclusive sexuality education. As for trans rights advocacy, Hotline had organized transgender consultation hotline with Taiwan TG Butterfly Garden and other NGO since 2008. And in 2010, we set up a transgender working group, and this group provided the transgender community with resources and brought trans issues to the public through lectures and trans march. Besides, Hotline has also worked with government departments, which is the topic I'm talking about today. So Taiwan is known for its significant achievement of gender equality in Asia. However, in regard to transgender issues, the low visibility is still a problem that causes the difficulties of trans rights advocacy in aspect of school, medical, and social education. We also noticed that transgender individuals are exhausted from exploring resources on their own in daily life or transition due to a lack of help from government departments, while most non-government organizations could only offer interpersonal support and legal aid service. So we need to do more. And there are many systems built on the gender binary that trouble and bother transgender people. If the government could implement more trans-inclusive policies and making those regulations less binary or more flexible, the situation would be improved. So how to make government policies more trans-inclusive through public-private collaboration? To be honest, it is also a long journey for NGOs to work with central and local governments. Before trans rights advocacy, Hotline has a lot of experience on LGBT rights advocacy. Sometimes we work with government departments, and sometimes we protest and fight against government departments. So speaking of history, I take Taipei city government as an example. In 2010, there was an official document from Taipei City Department of Education. It warned junior and senior high schools to watch out for LGBT clubs on campus, implying that these clubs might endanger the physical and mental health for students. And activities and educators were outraged and initiated a series of actions, which more than 200 people were involved in. And this series of protests continued for 6 months. As a result, the Taipei city government built up a formal channel of communication. LGBT Community Affairs Coordination Meeting, SUS, was established in 2011 in the Department of Civil Affairs and Taipei City Government. Such a mechanism continues until now. LGBT Community Affairs Coordination Meetings advise non-government organizations and government departments to participate in 2 to 3 times each year. And NGO workers thus has an approach to give their advices on policies concerning LGBT issues, which help to put inclusive proposals into practice. The All Genders Room is an example. Likewise, NGOs ask the Department of Health to add information about transgender in their LGBTQ plus inclusive medical handbook. Also, representative of LGBTQ plus organizations started to be invited to join the Committee of Women's Rights Promotion. Now it's named the Committee of Gender Equality, in which they have more power to do policies, supervision, and suggestions. After the setup of the Taipei City Office for Gender Equality in 2014, LGBTQ plus committed members could use the tools of performance evaluation to suggest city departments engage in more service related to gender diversity to improve their evaluation results. In the last 2 decades, transgender issues seems to be from invisible additional to highlight to government departments. And take Taipei LGBT Civil Rights Festival as an example. This annual event has been held by Taipei City Department of Civil Affairs with non-government organizations help since 2000. At the beginning, trans issues were little discussed, and later the definition of transgender were added in the handbook of Tongzhi, which means LGBTQ plus in Chinese. In 2021, the festival first chose transgender to be the theme of the whole festival. Adapting to the pandemic, the event transformed into online activity and launched the first transgender website from the government. And Hotline was the consultant of this website. So this is the website of transgender. It's all in Chinese, but it provides some information about transgender to our citizens. Then not only did we give advice to officials in government departments, but we also try to educate them about transgender issues through lectures. And there were few lectures titled Transgender until 2020, but we have already added transgender into lectures about LGBT for years. In 2021, Hotline was invited to give lectures about transgender for officials in all 12 districts of Taipei City. These lectures aim to prevent them from being ignorant and offensive toward transgender people. Another case about public-private collaboration from experiences of Hotline is doing investigation. In 2021, the Taipei City government was asked to know more about transgender students in the Taipei City Committee of Gender Equality. Therefore, Hotline was commissioned by the Department of Education to investigate the situation of transgender students in Taipei City. Then we were able to give advice based on this investigation. So after reviewing these works I mentioned above, and here are some thoughts we'd like to share. And first is about agenda setting. On one hand, we insist that transgenders should not and cannot be reduced to LGBT issues. But on the other hand, we do think that it is important for trans rights advocacy to learn and benefit from the history and legacy of the LGBTQ plus social movement in Taiwan. So our strategy is more like pursuing a step-by-step progress. Second is managing our relationship with government departments. As non-government organization workers, we are used to watching their policies and expressing our opinions. Usually, we condemn them or we reminded them to improve. But recently, we found that sometimes it's better for us to collaborate with officials. Maintaining a relationship with them help us to do our job. So we become more moderate sometimes. And our mindset here is like, how can we make them follow us and do more for trans rights? And our interventions are from below, but not just stay there. From our experience, the attitude of officials is crucial. If some government department, even if some government departments act improperly toward transgender people, most of the people in there would believe we're not hostile towards transgender people, but stayed uninformed and clueless. So we keep seeking opportunities for communicating and making allies. And third is learning knowledge and techniques about the operation of government departments. There are many details. For example, we need to get familiar with the rules of procedure and to check the meeting minutes to make sure that the decisions and the trans-inclusive suggestions were fully documented. So finally, from our point of view, neither the government nor the public in Taiwan is well informed enough about transgender issues and trans rights. We just started to gain some experience about public-private collaborations in trans rights advocacy, and we hope that there will be more. In addition, we also expect to deepen our understanding of the situation about transgender people on campus and the workplace. We noticed that after gay marriage was legalized in Taiwan, attention on transgender issues was raised. We believe that this is good timing for us to moving forward. However, anti-LGBT groups are also trying to approach government departments through attending meetings as parents, so they can occupy positions in committees about gender equality. And they might ally with officials too. So we will continue watching if our government obey international conventions and implement LGBT inclusive policies indeed. So this is my presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Pan, for your wonderful sharing on your experiences in working with government departments. So next, we will have Grace Proch from the LGBTQ officer of the City of Hanover to talk about gender diversity and public services, successful collaborations between municipal governments and advocacy groups. Let's welcome Grace.
As our moderator said, my name is Grace Proch, and I'm working as an LGBTI officer for the city of Hanover in Germany, which is currently the chair city of the International Rainbow Cities Network. Just to give you a little bit of an idea about our context, the city of Hanover is the 13th biggest city in Germany with a little of over 500,000 inhabitants. Tiny in comparison to Taipei, but still a rather big city. The city of Hanover has an active policy to fight discrimination, improve living conditions, and provide equal opportunities for LGBTIQ citizens in all areas of life. It has a special department with 3 LGBTIQ officers, including myself, to develop and implement necessary actions to meet this objective. We are also very lucky to have a very big and diverse LGBTIQ community in Hanover, that is very active in shaping their own city. We have been able to realize numerous projects in collaboration with those groups. Similar to the situation in Taiwan and many other countries, while the fight for gay, lesbian, and bisexual rights and equal opportunities has made great strides in recent decades, even if we are still far from reaching true equality, the fight against stigmatization and discrimination and for equal rights and opportunities of trans, intersex, and non-binary people is still somewhat in its infancy, or maybe adolescence if you want to see it a little bit more optimistic. While we as the municipal government have little influence on the national legislation, there are still many things we can do for trans, intersex, and non-binary people on a local level. As such, this has become an increasingly important part of our work. So what exactly has the city of Hanover been doing to reduce discrimination and improve opportunities of trans, intersex, and non-binary people? Hang on. Okay. To give you a few examples, apart from our regular funding of our LGBTIQ Center and LGBTIQ Youth Center, which host many trans, intersex, and non-binary groups and services, and 2 counseling centers in Hanover offering counseling and support for trans people, as well as realizing smaller projects like visibility and awareness campaigns, conferences, and publications. We have taken several actions in recent years to specifically tackle the structural discrimination and improve the conditions for trans, intersex, and non-binary citizens. As you can see, a few of them are awareness trainings for our employees working with children, youth, and families about trans, intersex, and non-binary people, a reform of our administrative language to be gender inclusive to more than 2 genders, implementing designated swimming times for trans, intersex, and non-binary people in public pools, providing designated safe accommodations for trans refugees, founding a roundtable working group on gender diversity, and starting a project to implement all gender toilets in public buildings. Most recently, we also started tackling the topic of homelessness of trans, intersex, and non-binary people. Since I have been asked to speak about our experiences cooperating with trans, intersex, and non-binary advocacy groups, I would like to focus on 3 examples of successful collaboration. The Roundtable Working Group on Gender Diversity, our project to implement all gender toilets, and last but not least, our successfully implemented designated swimming times for trans, intersex, and non-binary people. I'm going to jump right into the first example, the Roundtable Working Group on Gender Diversity. The city of Hanover has a roundtable that meets 3 times a year and brings together advocacy groups from the LGBTIQ community, representatives from various administrative departments, as well as city council members to discuss topics important to the LGBTIQ community. Last year, we founded a special working group focusing solely on gender diversity. Various trans, intersex, and non-binary groups are already members of the roundtable, and trans, intersex, and non-binary topics will remain to be discussed at the roundtable. But the working group gives us another opportunity to talk about their concerns in depth and possibly report back to the roundtable. We felt that this was a necessary step to pay more attention to concerns historically disregarded, and that the expertise of the trans, intersex, and non-binary community would help us improve our work. Currently, members of the working group include representatives from our LGBTIQ and LGBTIQ youth centers, as well as individual trans and non-binary groups, the Provincial Coordinator for Trans and Non-Binary Concerns, the Provincial Coordinator for Intersex Groups and Concerns, 2 counseling centers offering counseling and support for trans people, a trans and non-binary health project, and the LGBTIQ police liaison for the province, who also happens to be trans. The goals of the working group are to foster exchange and collaborations between us and the various groups and institutions, but also among the groups and institutions themselves, as well as to strengthen the political participation of trans, intersex, and non-binary people, and to give their concerns a stronger voice. Other than that, the working group itself defines the goals it wants to work towards. At the moment, we are working on compiling a paper comprising all potential fields of actions concerning trans, intersex, and non-binary people that can be addressed at a local level. This could be fields like healthcare, unemployment, homelessness, etc. In a second step, we want to prioritize those fields of action and identify possible agents and stakeholders to work on those fields, which could be the municipality, but also other institutions, companies, and groups. And finally, we are planning on devising possible measures that could be taken in each area. The final paper will help us to define future goals as a working group. At the same time, it will aid us as LGBTIQ officers to direct our work, serve as a roadmap for future projects and collaborations of the member groups and institutions, and hopefully guide our city council members and other policymakers in their decisions. The working group is an example for a permanent fixture of collaboration between municipalities and various advocacy groups and institutions. While the working group currently works on the bigger picture, at the same time, there are concrete projects our department is working on. One of these is the second example I would like to present, which is a project to implement all gender toilets. The project is a collaboration between the municipal administration, the Provincial Coordinator for Trans and Non-Binary Concerns, and the Provincial Coordinator for Intersex Groups and Concerns. Both are private, non-government community advocates representing various advocacy groups and concerns in the province. I consider myself extremely lucky to have those two, their expertise and support. The 3 of us meet for a jour fixe once a month, where we speak about current issues, see how we can support each other, and realize joint projects, campaigns, and events. The issue we are working on since last year are public toilets. So what is this about? Since 1918, German legislation recognizes the existence of more than 2 genders. A lot of laws, processes, and practices that need to be adapted as a result of this will likely take a long time to be changed. On a local level, however, we are faced with the actual needs of the people living in our municipalities and often cannot wait years to responsibly address the needs and concerns of our citizens. Access to public toilets is one of the most basic human needs, but for trans, intersex, and non-binary people, visiting the public toilet is often associated with discrimination, exclusion, or even assault. Currently, most buildings in Germany, like probably most countries around the world, only have female and male toilets. This poses a major problem for people who do not fit into the classic gender binary, be it because they are in the process of transitioning, because they don't pass as male or female in the hegemonic gaze. And this, by the way, is not only a problem limited to trans, intersex, and non-binary people, but also affects cis people with a non-conforming gender expression. Or people who cannot or do not want to pass as male or female because they are neither or both. Considering this, our goal is to draft guidelines for municipalities, companies, and other institutions on how to implement all gender toilets, addressing legal, financial, and practical issues. And as a long-term goal, we want to successfully implement all gender toilets in public buildings. While this project is still in development, the final example I want to share with you is one that has already been successfully implemented. The project All Bodies Swim was initiated by an advocacy group. One of the trans groups attending the aforementioned roundtable, we didn't have the working group back then, approached us and asked us for designated swimming times for trans, intersex, and non-binary people in public pools. The reasoning behind this is simple enough to understand. Many trans, intersex, and non-binary people face massive discrimination when using public pools if their bodies do not conform to the standards of the hegemonic binary gender order. This may be in the form of body policing or verbal abuse, or simply not knowing which change room or showers to safely use. This results in many trans, intersex, and non-binary people understandably shunning public pools and not being able to find any place to safely swim. Since in Germany, the operation of public pools is one of the services provided by municipalities to their citizens, their concern was one directly under our purview. We approached the department responsible for managing sports and recreation facilities to find a way to establish designated swimming times. In our argumentation, we highlighted the physiological and psychological benefits of partaking in sports, and especially swimming, and the duty of local municipalities to provide public services to all of their citizens. What helped us was that a similar service, namely designated swimming times for women, has long been an established concept in many public pools. Together, we found a pool, in this case, a privately operated public pool, happy to offer the service. The swimming times, now dubbed All Body Swim, take place once a month for 2 hours. During that time, only trans, intersex, and non-binary people, as well as accompanying friends and family members, are admitted to the pool. The staff of the pool has received an awareness briefing before the start of the project. Participants are free to wear whichever swimwear matches their personal gender expression, as long as it is functional swimwear. They also commit to not stare at or police anybody's body. Since we have started the project, the collaboration within the advocacy groups has grown, and we are now 4 project partners, including 1 intersex advocacy groups, which makes us really happy. I'm optimistic that with the no project partners, and once, hopefully, more people are able to use sports facilities again, All Body Swim will be a public service to last. Concluding, I cannot stress enough how important and productive it is that policymakers and local administrations listen to and include the expertise of advocacy groups in drafting policies and taking action to better the living conditions for all citizens. This holds especially true for trans, intersex, and non-binary advocacy groups, since trans, intersex, and non-binary people and their concerns historically have been, and sadly often still are, silenced or at least disregarded. To us, the initiatives of advocacy groups and our collaborative efforts are a valuable asset to the work we do in our municipalities. I hope that these examples of successful collaborations between our municipal government and local advocacy groups help you with your own endeavors. And I'm looking forward to your questions and comments in the hopefully lively discussion later. Thank you.
Okay. So everybody could see the light. Is it okay? Okay. I know. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jin from the Office of for Gender Equality of Taipei City Government. First, I want to thank Sean, May, Olivia, Han, and Chu Tong from Taiwan Tongzhi Hotline Association, and Chamindra from ILGA Ward, and Grace from the City of Hanover. For organizing this panel with us, especially in the challenging time of COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm very happy to meet the audience online today. I have worked at this office for over 7 years and responsible for LGBT issues. About transgender, the topic today, I am going to share how we work and how we make policies with non-binary thinking through public-private partnership, and during the process, what challenges we have. At the beginning, I will give you some background information. Please see the slides. After the martial law was lifted in 1987, a lot of activists and protesters walked out on the street and fought for basic human rights like freedom of speech, democracy, environmental protection, labor's rights, women's rights, and of course, LGBT rights. In 2004, Taiwan passed the Gender Equity Education Act. In the past, people have no idea about gender equality and gender concepts. So the act regulates that students and teachers should take the course of gender equality, including LGBT knowledge. Because of this regulation, people under 36 years old are mostly educated, but people over 36 years old are not. You can see the percentage on the bottom of the slide. It's about 38% mostly with gender equality education versus 62% without. In fact, the LGBT rights has been discussed for many years. The Same-Sex Marriage Act was finally passed in 2019. In Taiwan, we have a government official who is transgender, but transgender issues always draw very little attention until then. I would say in the past, governments play a small part in the LGBT rights movement. Instead, the power of civil society and the NGOs contribute to what we have today. But now it is the time that governments work with NGOs to make a bigger progress. And then I will show you what Taipei City government does for transgender people. Before that, some information that our participants should know about the law and the reality in Taiwan. If a person wants to change their birth gender on the paper, they are requested not only to have document from 2 different psychiatrists, but also to remove their genitals like testicles and the penis, breast, uterus, and ovaries. But before sex change, transgender people will live a life full of discrimination. In fact, some of trans don't want sex reassignment surgery because the surgery costs a lot and could do an unrecoverable damage to them. So the transgender rights advocacy groups demand government allow changing sex without surgery. But this is about amendment to national laws. As a local government, Taipei City as a local government, we insist to protect LGBT rights through policies and initiatives within our duty. To be honest, in addition to laws and policies, the more important thing is to change the people's mindset and attitude. So we spend a lot of effort on education and policy making. It is very difficult for government itself to make policy design with a perspective of LGBT. That's because from employees to decision makers, all of them are unfamiliar with the issues. So the government needs to cooperate with NGOs. We have two different kinds of meetings. One is, you could see on the slide on the left. That is LGBT Community Affairs Coordination Meeting, just Pan just mentioned. This meeting is routinely convened by deputy mayor, mostly, and 3 times a year. And it is attended by Gender Equity Education Committee members, LGBT advocacy groups, and related government departments. To focus on transgender rights issue, we have another consultation meeting, just you see on the right of the slide. In addition to NGOs, transgender people themselves are also invited to give opinions. Through these meetings, we could understand what transgender people need and how can we help them, and how we make the policy design more transgender inclusive. And let's see about the education part. It is mainly about public awareness and the training for frontline government employees. Civil Affairs Department organized the LGBTQ citizen event every year, usually partner with LGBT advocacy groups. The events have different themes by years, like same-sex couple weddings, gay and lesbian families, or LGBT people in workplace. It is the first time that the event takes transgender as the theme in 2021. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the event turned to be an online exhibition. It lets everyone read the basic knowledge and information about transgender and their daily lives and stories. And people can watch transgender film online. One special part is the paper cut workshop, which was attended by transgender and their family. Transgender people usually go through a lot of misery when they grow up or pursue their way of living. By participating in the workshop, they can express themselves by paper cut arts. All these works are put on the website. Not just public education, training for our employees is very important. The training starts from frontline staff because their work is very close to the public. They need to keep sensitive to LGBT issues. Our Civil Affairs Department worked with LGBT NGOs together, invites transgender to give a talk about their experiences. So our employees can see real transgender people standing in front of them and listen to their stories and even discuss trans issues together. Not only training courses, Civil Affairs Department cooperates with Tongzhi Hotline Association to create a pamphlet about trans, including trans people's daily lives and some other supporting resources. Our staff can look up if they need after the training. Here are some feedbacks from the employees. Due to gender binary thinking and systems, it is very difficult for most people to understand gender diversity. But some of our staff can understand a little bit more about what difficulty transgender people go through after the training. After the education part, we move on to the policy. According to the transgender consultation meeting, we ask every department to review their services and do a moderation for trans. All the services and initiatives are collected as a package. As you see on the slide, we call it the Transgender Friendly Services Project. It has 23 services and initiatives, and there are 13 departments involved. This project includes services like improving medical environment and resources, helping trans students adapt to school life, encouraging enterprises to create LGBT-friendly workplace, recruiting LGBT-friendly shops and restaurants, providing guidelines for constructing all gender restrooms, and special measures for trans during health checkup before military service, and offering the third option for gender. And next, I will give you two examples in this project. First one is LGBTI plus friendly guidelines for professions in medical institutions. This handbook was edited first time in 2013 with help from Tongzhi Hotline Association. After then, transgender-friendly guidelines was added in 2021. The guidelines are mainly for the management level in hospitals, including how to improve the services and the attitudes of medical professions. Transgender patients needed to be respected according to their gender identity. For example, medical documents could be designed with birth gender and the gender identity simultaneously. Doctors are reminded not to stop hormone therapy before consulting another transgender professional. And transgender's privacy needs to be protected. For example, trans patients are allowed to stay in a ward according to the gender that they identify. And this handbook has been distributed to all the medical institutions in Taipei. The health department also demands that training for doctors and nurses should include these guidelines. The next one is about special measure during health checkup before military service. Let me give you some background information. All Taiwanese men are required to serve in the military after 18 years old. Before the service, each man needs to finish health checkup first, because one could skip service due to his health problems. As you see on the slide, sorry. This is the correct slide, sorry. As you see on the slide, the picture, there will be a group of men lining up and waiting for being checked with upper body naked. This situation makes trans anxious and uncomfortable. So our department, our military service department, designs special measures for protecting their privacy, like scheduling the time just for trans, give them independent space for changing clothes, and also all gender restrooms. LGBTI-friendly doctors and nurses will be appointed to do the checkup. And I think not everybody accepts the new ideas very soon. especially in Eastern Asian countries. The concept about differences between men and women is very deeply ingrained. LGBT issue is really a huge challenge for some people in Taiwan. This reflects on the complaints from public and the anxiety from our staff. We receive the complaints from time to time about worrying about men could peep women in all gender restrooms. Or someone would ask whether a biological man can use ladies' room if he wears long hair and a skirt. They are afraid that trans rights would do a damage to women's safety. Also, our colleagues express their worries and concerns, such as why does someone need a third option for gender? And what if someone asks them about third option for gender, they don't know how to answer it? They think collecting non-binary data is meaningless. To understand about transgender, education and training are necessary. This society is not friendly enough, so we must continue our work to understand and to respect transgender people and then to improve their lives. This will make the city more inclusive than before. And I remember one activist then mentioned in the consultation meeting, they said transgender-friendly policy is not just made for trans. All the policies should be inclusive, non-binary, and friendly to everyone in the world. I think they are right. Non-binary policies would be good for everybody. And last, one of my trans friends, Tong, he said one day when we don't need to talk about LGBTIQ issues anymore, that would be the most friendly world. And this is very similar to the goal of our office, which is to shut down ourselves, shut down our office. When the day comes, it means everyone, with no matter which sex or gender, can live freely and comfortably. Our office is no longer to be needed. And thank you for your listening. And that's my presentation.
Wow, I'd like to give a big thank you and applause to all the speakers today for sharing the great work you've done to incorporate trans-inclusive awareness and gender equality into public sectors. So now we're opening up the floor to discussions. If anyone in the audience would like to voice your questions or comments, please feel free to do so. I don't think we'll be having, I mean, you're free to speak up if you want, but if you're uncomfortable and you'd like to leave your questions or comments in the writing in the chat, it's also fine. So any questions or feedback from anybody? Yes, I see a hand from Nancy.
Yes, I've been coming to these UN sessions now for, I don't know, 6 years, 7 years. Yours is the first session I've really seen and heard. Maybe there's been more. And I think there really needs to be a lot more of this. It's just educating people. I mean, to me, people are people, and we just need to be able to help everybody. And everyone should be all inclusive. And I love your presentation. You brought up some great points that I had never even thought of before. And I am not LGBTQ, and I'm a grandmother. I'm in my 70s, and I think this was just absolutely amazing and well needed, and very much needed. And I thank you for that.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, anyone else would like to give their feedback? Okay, I see a hand from Pan. Oh, no, oh, sorry.
So So thanks to every speakers, but I have a specific question for Grace, because we are very curious about the LGBT, like inclusive swim project. So can you share more details about that with us? Thank you.
Of course I can. So, what kind of details, maybe you could tell me a little bit more about what you would like to know?
What's the result?
Yeah,
is there-
did people actually show up?
Yeah.
I mean, not,
Okay. Yeah.
but usually the trans community, it tends to be very shy and very sensitive about, especially when it comes to their body images and things like that. So we're really curious here as to, what's the turn up for the event, and how was the event received by the community?
Okay, so yeah, the turn up is actually great. I mean, the last couple of years, we couldn't let people go to swimming pools as much as we would have liked to due to COVID restrictions. So it's really difficult for me to talk about the success at this moment. But we started sometime before the pandemic, and back then we had more than 20 people attending, which is for like, I don't know if you know like how big our pools are. They're not that big, so 20 people is really all right, apparently, as the CEO of this pool told me. Like in the COVID times, we couldn't allow more than, depending on the stage, more than 10 or more than 16 people to attend. And also, I was worried that even if some people could attend, they wouldn't, because they wanted to look out for their own health, they wouldn't want to risk going to the pool due to the pandemic. But even then, I mean, there have been times where only 2 people attended. But for me, that was a success because it was amidst Corona, and I thought nobody would actually go to the pool. So of course, it's difficult to say at the moment. But the attendance was really great before the pandemic started. And I'm amazed by this too, because I know a lot of people, even cis people, who feel uncomfortable in public pools because of all this ingrained body image stuff that we all grew up with. And like, even if it's a safe space, there's still, I know that even within the transgender community, there's a lot of body policing, sadly. So I think it's really cool that a lot of people actually use this opportunity. And yeah. And how was it received? We actually had, at one point, I mean, the community received it very well. We get a lot of requests from other cities within Germany who want to start a project like this as well. The project got mentioned in some kind of German public pool association magazine. And there was at one point there was a hearing in our city council that was called for by very right-wing members of the council, why this was necessary, resources, and for whom all this, do we really have to spend that kind of money? But our mayor defended the swimming times using the same argumentation about the health benefits and the discrimination trans, intersex, and non-binary people face in public pools, and also the duty of municipalities to provide the service to everybody and not just some people. And apart from those, of course, who asked for the hearing, and the majority of the city council is in favor of those swimming times, which is quite impressive. Before I started working for the government, I used to be an activist for many years, and when I think back to the times when I was like a baby queer, I would have never imagined that something like this would be possible, that a whole city council is in favor of trans, intersex, and non-binary swimming times. But yeah, I think it's pretty cool. Yeah.
That is very cool. And we have someone in audience, Pip Gardner, saying that they also have swimming sessions for trans and non-binary people in Cambridge, UK. So, and they have about 10 people or so attending once a month. So it's very exciting. And I think it's great just to see that there are getting more and more places like this, having, providing public services and including for trans community, in their work. And I think this is a great note to the Taipei city government as well, to Jingyi and her coworkers, that perhaps Taipei could start implementing something like this, in the city-run swimming pools, as a test run. I think that's a great idea. That should be a lot of fun. Yep. Okay. Also, we are getting a very encouraging feedback from Teresa, saying that this is a truly CSW agenda setting session. Bravo and many thanks to the organizers and speakers. Your vision and achievement must have tremendously inspired many in the audience, me included. Thank you, Teresa. Love from Teresa Ye in Taipei. Yay. All right, thanks everybody. Anything else? Okay, I see, yes, Riley.
Hello, thank you all so much for your presentations. It's a wonderful way to spend a Thursday night here in Taiwan. I have two questions, one of them being more for the Taiwan presenters, and then one of them being for everyone. The first question is, what do you think the future of specifically Taipei public spaces will look like in the next few years for trans and non-binary folks? I ask this as a baby trans person who's spending a lot of time trying to figure out which bathroom they should use in the MRT, and not getting ma by abe or ama. And then the second one is, how, for all the presenters, how does your organization work to be intersectional in the work they're doing, specifically with people who are migrants or indigenous folks, or all the other intersections of identity? I asked because I did a lot of work with a migrant organization here in Taiwan for a little bit, and there's lots of queer and trans folks there, but they don't really get reached out to by any of the initiatives by government, which us trans folks only have so much energy and time. But I'm just curious as to what folks are trying to do in order to ensure that the work is moving in that direction as well. Thank you all so much.
Okay, thank you, Riley. Let's answer the first questions first. So anyone from Taiwan would like to, try to imagine what the scene would look like for trans community in Taiwan or Taipei in the next 10 years? Maybe Pan? No? Wow, maybe it's just too late here in the evening, so people are running out of imagination. But all right, then okay. Then let's give the Taiwanese people here a few minutes to think about what things would look like in the next 10 years. But so for Grace and Shamandra, is there any for the second question? Would you like to comment on that?
Would you like to go first? Probably it might be interesting to hear, because Germany being increasingly, more and more diverse when it comes to the composition of German society. And I'll pitch in probably after you, Grace.
I can do that. Yeah, you're right. The German society is getting more and more diverse, and it's really great to see. I used to live in different countries, and when I came back to Germany, 20 years ago, it seems awfully white to me. But this has really been changing, and that's good. Yeah, about intersectionality, that's actually something that is very important to us in our work. We want to approach our work more in a kind of do more solidarity politics instead of identity politics. and try to think about other diversity dimensions when we implement something new. We have, within the city administration, we have a diversity network where members of different departments responsible for diversity dimensions regularly meet and talk about the work they do. And thinking about one of the projects I presented today, one thing that will make the whole all gender toilet project take a little bit longer, but it's absolutely worth to us, is to approach this from an intersectional point of view as well, because maybe that's not too uncommon and not even a German thing, but many people suggest to use toilets for people using a wheelchair as all gender toilets, which kind of, at first it seems like a practical idea, but it clashes with the fight of people with disabilities for recognition of their gender identity, which they often are denied. Also, some of those toilets cater to very special needs, and if a lot of people use those toilets, they won't be available as much as they need to, and yeah, that's kind of like a problem, and it's a point where people trying to save money, which of course is always an issue for municipalities, would suggest, well, why don't we do that? And we might want to make a strong point to not do that. And we are planning to talk to an organization that we have in Germany that's called Queer Handicap, which is an organization of queer people with handicaps, obviously, and talk to them about how we could approach this, and maybe even get a better situation for those other toilets when we do our toilet thing, so to say. Also, we're thinking about how, like the plates that they have braille written on it as well, and talk to an organization telling us how, because one topic you're talking about when you're talking about toilets a lot is what pictures to use. Some people suggest using the transgender symbol, which to us is not an option at all, because we don't want to make toilets for trans people or non-binary people to like make them something different, something other, but we want to have toilets for everybody. And so that's not working. And then something that's also often used is the like half male, half female symbol, which is also not something that a lot of advocacy groups like. So we're using, like the pictures I showed you, we want to use just pictures of like a toilet or a shower, depending on what is telling the people what they actually can expect to find behind the door. But that leaves us with the problem, like how, if it only says all gender toilet for people who can't see, that isn't on an equal footing. So we want to talk to them, like translation associations, how we could best achieve that. And I heard of a company here that recently changed I don't know whether that's I think it's an international thing, that often for male toilets, the urinals are just like next to each other and there's no way of privacy, which doesn't really work for a lot of people, also cis people. And one company here recently changed that and made cubicles around the urinals. And they said they did that because they have a lot of Muslim people working for them, which is a little bit curious to me, but great if that is why they did it. And so I think there's a way how we can like work together and be stronger together if we talk to each other.
Yeah, definitely. So thanks for sharing. It's so great to hear this, because we usually, when we talk about LGBT or trans issues, we tend to focus on maybe just one aspect of it, like the sexuality or orientation or employment in one regard, but actually, yeah, the thought of intersectionality is very important because it broadens the whole scope of the issues. You know, like you said, in the trans person with disabilities or with, there could be class or unemployment, all kinds of social issues when coming together and so intertwined. And that's what makes it worthwhile for us to discuss all the intricacies among them. And it's just very important. Yeah, I'm glad that your work has touched on this, on the intersectionality. Yep. Okay, anything from Shamandra? Any comments?
Yes, so what I meant to add was that, this understanding of intersectionality, intersectionality being a Black feminist principle developed in the Black feminist tradition in North America. So the fundamental principle being, you don't live single issue lives, right? You live multiple issue lives, and so many different lived realities intersecting in your life, and it's these lived realities have an effect on the relational dynamics, how you relate to power, how you relate to the existing structures in place in society, and so on and so forth. So the principle of intersectional inclusion is very important when we think of public policy. So a few years ago, group of colleagues and myself, we got together, we created a collective called the Consortium for Intersectional Justice. I can put the website here, Consortium for Intersectional Justice.org. There we are. And so it's a long email, a long web address. So this collective, basically what it does is very low key, engages with government departments, government bodies in a number of different countries, and tries to have conversations with policymakers on what it means to promote intersectional justice in policymaking. So when you say intersectional justice, people at times wonder, what does that mean exactly? What's that all about? So the point there is precisely developing policies that are intersectionally inclusive, that understands the multiple realities involved in the local context. So Black feminist thinkers who have done a lot of international work, like Professor Audre Lorde, who used to live for many years in Germany, and she was one of the pioneers who helped develop the women of color and Black feminist mobilization in Germany. And one thing Audre Lorde has repeatedly said in her work is that intersectionality is a transferable concept. So it was developed in Black feminism, yes. I mean, if you look at some of the fundamental texts of Black feminism, like the Combahee River Collective Statement, which was written by a group of Black lesbian feminists in the 1970s. So you see a very strong emphasis on the concept of intersectionality. It dates back, to many years. In the legal profession, people, talk about intersectionality, particularly referring to Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a law professor. She wrote an article in 1989, and it's very often attributed to her, but the concept as such in Black feminism has a much longer history. So how you understand intersectionality, in intersectional inclusion in your local context is something very important, and so for us as an international advocacy organization, when we think of whatever it is that we do, when we engage with UN systems, or when we try to support our communities, especially trans communities, with their submissions to the Universal Periodic Review or their engagements with United Nations treaty bodies in Geneva. A focus on intersectional justice, intersectional inclusion is very important to make sure that, if we had to bring a delegation of people from a certain country to the UN offices in Geneva, for example, respecting a gender balance, things that may sound basic at times, but things that are very significant, very important, So I think those are concepts that are are very beneficial to those of us in international advocacy, those of us who are in government responsibilities, and those of us who are in public policy, and for those of us who are in non-governmental organizations in our respective countries advocating for human rights. So the point there is, the key point there is, how do you understand intersectional justice in your local context? And the final point that I would add is, when you think along these lines, there is another gift of Black feminism in North America, a key Black feminist teaching that we all, can benefit from by keeping it in mind. It is the fact that, see, the work that we do as human rights defenders, it's a constant process. So the work does not end, it has no end point. So we bring in set of very progressive policies that concern trans human rights in a city council level or in national government level. It doesn't mean that thereafter we are all good, we put all the work to rest. It means that there is something else that we have to deal with thereafter. There'll be other challenges, other issues that we'll have to deal with. So Black feminist thinkers very often say that some of the work we do today for Black liberation or for abolition or for gender justice or social justice, some of that work, the fruit of that work, we might not necessarily see it within our lifetimes, especially when you think of big issues in this part of the world, in North America, like policing violence against Black people, for example, right? So that this principle applied to LGBTQI plus human rights work helps us put things in perspective, because at times when you put one step forward, there can be circumstances where you'll have to take 2 steps back. At times, you'll have to take a step back to protect our communities. When you work in very dangerous, volatile contexts where there's a lot of anti-LGBT, anti-trans language or discourse happening. So when it's like that, as Dr. Angela Davis says, it's very important to keep a very strong sense of optimism and to accept the fact that some of the work that we do, we give our best, but we may not see the results of that work within our lifetimes. We might, the next generation, Gen Z today, or the generation that follows, I have a daughter who is 10 years old, her generation probably will see the results of our work. Having that perspective is very important as well, because it helps you put things in perspective. And when you face challenges in the work that we do, to me personally, this has been very helpful to have that kind of long-term view on the kind of work that we do. So that again is a very important principle to be shared from Black feminist work. Over to you, True.
Thank you, Shamindra. Yeah, definitely in a times like this, optimism is something we definitely need to have.
Well, I think for the question, I will answer the second question first about the intersectionality. And for me personally, I think it's important for NGO about LGBTQI plus to collaborate with other non-government organizations, because we actually help some transgender immigrants from Hong Kong last year. And things, I don't know, you might not know, the situation of transgender in Hong Kong is becoming like more and more dangerous than ever. And some immigrants come to Taiwan and they are transgender, and some transgender came to us. And, we might not, we cannot just help them by ourselves. So we work with other other NGOs which care about the immigrant human rights. And there are some, likewise, we also collaborate with some government departments working on the indigenous people. So I think it's because in Taiwan we not just doing LGBT issues, we actually care about like different aspect of social issues like the rise of the labor or the rise of like other groups. So it's important to like build up a network between like this and to provide resources. And because transgender people actually is everywhere. So it actually is my answer to the first question, because I'm not a person good at imagining, so I cannot like draw a dramatical change or this kind of picture in Taipei City. But I can only hope that wherever transgender people go, there are like people as inclusive and well informed about transgender people, and that is what we will keep working on to achieve that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Or Jingyi, would you like to comment? Yeah, I think Jingyi has a comment she'd like to share.
I think as a government officer, I think it's a little bit hard for me to answer the question one, but I think it's important to make the city more inclusive, and the way to do that, I think we have to let more and more people know about transgender actually being around everyone. And I take an example of myself. I can imagine that transgender people would face challenges every day. For example, my office is on the first floor in the building, and there are many people come into our building, and when I go to the restroom, ladies' room, strange people look at me and tell me that, hey, you go to the wrong room. The men's room is next. So I think our people need to be educated about what, no matter what trans or LGBT concepts. I think more and more showing these groups and LGBT people will help people, the public, to familiar with this world is not just heterosexual or not just real men or real women. So I think it takes time. It will take time to achieve that. So we have to wait. Maybe it will take 10 years, 20 years, but one day we'll be there. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Jingyi. Yeah. Hopefully we'll get there soon. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, no. If no, luckily I have a question. Oh, no. Yeah, so thank you from Riley. Then I have a question of my own. So I like to, while we were talking about intersectionality, and I kind of want to make an echo to the theme of this year's CSW is about, gender equality in the context of disasters and climate change. And as we know that COVID-19 has been with us for more than 2 years now. So I'm just curious, is there any discussion or initiatives between your government office and advocacy groups in this regard of how COVID has affected the trans or LGBTIQ communities, or not, maybe not just COVID, more than COVID, the climate change, conflicts, even war. I don't know if anyone can comment on that, but I think I'd be interested to hear about your perspectives. That's a tough one.
I could try to tell you a little bit. It's probably not as rich as you would hope to be, but yeah. So about COVID, we have this LGBTIQ youth center that I mentioned before, and actually most of there are many different youth groups meeting there, and young people are going there directly after school to do their homework together and things like that. And many of the kids there and many of the groups are actually trans and non-binary groups. And when COVID started to happen, the center, of course, had to close down at first. They were very quick to open a virtual youth center using a Discord server, where they have different rooms to do things like in the different groups in the youth center. And it's not an open server. You have to verify that you're actually a person that usually would have gone to the physical center. And yeah, they're doing they try to do the same things that they did in the physical center. And they have different, like, just fun groups in there, but they also support each other, because for a lot of trans and non-binary youth, having to stay home and not even being able to go to school or this youth center was very, very difficult, especially if those were kids who did not have very supportive parents. Sometimes schools even prove to be more liberal places than your home, and to have this lifeline to the youth center cut off was very difficult for them. We kept in touch with the youth center and asked them how they're dealing with this, how people are affected by this, and yeah, they try to deal with it as best as they could by offering the services online, and always having somebody there for the kids to approach, to tell them when they felt really bad or when they needed help. Yeah, some young people with very severe problems actually also approached the center. The center could intervene as best as they could. Yeah, that is something about how we dealt with COVID for trans and non-binary youth. About war, I can't really say much about the current situation because it's still in the very early. People, the refugees that are coming to Germany right now are still dealing with very, very basic things, and the whole administration is working 24/7 to try and deal with all of this best as possible. But I have mentioned before that I didn't really mention it a lot, but We have a concept to get LGBTIQ people who are in group shelters and who face trouble in group shelters and to safe accommodations. We started with we have social workers who are at our office every Thursday, where LGBTIQ people can go and talk to them about immigration if they're coming from a country where they fled from because they were LGBTIQ, and they can get into those safe accommodations if they have problems in the bigger shelters. We have one house that is for gay men, one house that is for lesbian and bisexual women, where there's like single rooms and rooms for couples. And a little bit later, we started to have apartments for trans people. At the moment, I think we have 7 or 8 single apartments where trans people can get into to be safe. Unfortunately, we have like a waiting list that is twice the length of the apartments we have. Yeah, we hope to maybe be able to improve on that, but I guess trying to get project finance at the moment will be tough, but yeah, we will try.
Yeah, definitely trying. And it's great, just great to see that the trans inclusive awareness is being incorporated into humanitarian aid. Yeah, and it's definitely a great thinking point here. Okay. Okay, is there anyone else that'd like to contribute a comment or questions, feedback? Maybe just a reflection of your thoughts. Okay, maybe Han, you could share about some of the struggles that the trans communities face in the context of COVID.
We heard lots of trans people like losing their job due to the pandemics, and since they can earn enough money, so which brings some effect to their transition, their daily life, and also since there's a time that we can just go to the inclusive hospital. So like we can approach to the service that they really need. Yeah, that's true.
Anything else? Okay, if no further comments or feedback, maybe do we have anything from? All right. Then looks like no. Okay, then I think it's time that we call this a day. And I want to thank you all again for participating in this session. And thank you all the speakers for bringing wonderful sharing and experiences and perspectives into this world. All right, then here I wish everybody a good night or a good day, no matter where you are. Be safe, stay healthy, and take care of yourself. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one. Bye-bye.